Always add value, always be confident, and don't ever just call to check in. Show value, go the extra mile, get them comfortable and build trust. Leverage those resources, leverage that network, because at the end of the day, and to use a silly baseball analogy, when you step into the plate, you still have to perform. Take your family's help, but do right with it. Do it with integrity and lead well. But don't make it harder than it needs to be for yourself. The world is tough as it is, right? It's very tough. Take the opportunities you have and make the most out of them.
Greetings, my Fearless Family Business friends. This is the Fearless Family Business Show, and I am Adam Hill. And we want to help you to inject new life into your family business and strengthen the love, the legacy, and the lifestyle that you desire. And my guest today, is a really good one. I am excited to share this one with you because this is probably one of my first repeat guests. I interviewed Damon Lembi when this was the Flow Over Fear podcast, and we dug into his story, which is incredible. And if you haven't listened to that, I would suggest you go into your DeLorean and you go back in podcast history and you listen to Damon's first interview and you learn about his story. But before you do that, listen to this one, because in this one, we talk more about his family business and the family business legacy that his family has built over time and how that has impacted him, how he's grown through it, how their business has evolved. It's been incredible. Damon Lembi is a two-time best-selling author. He's the CEO of Learnit, which is a live learning platform that has upskilled over 2 million people. And he's the host of the Learnit podcast, which I had the pleasure of appearing on recently. And Learnit is a nearly 30-year-old business rooted in a family business empire that we will talk about today. It was a business that originally began with Damon's grandfather, Frank Lembi, who took a post-World War II GI Bill and built a nearly $2 billion with a B real estate empire in the San Francisco Bay Area. And over the next 2 generations, that family business evolved into multiple directions, which included the highly successful Learnit company, of which Damon has worked his way up from receptionist to CEO. And drawing from his prior baseball career, Damon brings an athlete's perspective to leadership. And through his journey, he has gained invaluable insights into what helps organizations grow, how great leaders learn, and why Learn-It-All companies outpace their competitors every time. Damon is one of my favorite people because he shares so candidly his family business experience and his stories and what legacy means to him and how we can work to develop a value-add work ethic to our family business. So enjoy this incredible episode with Damon Lembi. Welcome, Damon. It is so good to have you here. Thank you so much for being here again. You were here on Flow Over Fear where I interviewed you, and it was just such a great interview. And now that we've kind of moved into the family business format that we're Fearless Family Business, I had to have you back on because your story, your family's business, how it's evolved over time, and the things you've done are pretty incredible. And I think your story is going to be valuable to a lot of people. So thanks for being here, Damon.
Thank you, Adam. I always enjoy our conversations, buddy. So I'm thrilled to be here.
Yeah, and since we've talked last, a lot has happened with you and the growth of your business. Learn-It-All podcast is now out, and I had the pleasure of being a guest there. And you've had some great guests, a great YouTube channel, great format, and yeah, that's been going awesome. And I'd love to, and I want to kind of get into that. But I also want to get into like the start, where you began, how you grew up with a family business already intact. And I kind of know how that is. I grew up in the family business as well. And I'd love to know about your experience, maybe just being born into the whole family business experience and what that was like growing up, what you learned and gleaned in the early days of Damon Lembi.
Yeah, I mean, my whole life was around family business and a very, very strong family. So I grew up in the San Francisco Bay Area. For me personally, as a kid, it was all about sports. All my friends were into sports. fast forward to high school, I figured that baseball was my best opportunity to play in college and pro. And so I got to be pretty good at baseball, ended up being drafted. I was a high school All-American, and I had my first opportunity to make a big decision. I decided to go to college. I got hurt. I ended up going to a different college, Arizona State. I played at Arizona State, thought I was going to move on and have a career as a professional baseball player. And Adam, growing up, and this is important, I never had to work in any of our family businesses because it was all about baseball for me. You know, I baseball and basketball, whatever sports. And so when my baseball career came to an end at 22 years old at Arizona State, you know, I went through an identity crisis. I was like, well,
Sure.
who am I? You know, I was going to be a baseball player my whole life. And quite frankly, I was depressed and I was also intimidated. My family and our family business, and I'm sure we'll get into all of this, but you know, we had a hotel chain. We were one of the largest multifamily private owners in San Francisco. We had a shopping center, a Chinese restaurant, a savings and loan. And so we had all of these. And I didn't think I had any skills that were transferable from baseball into family business. And so at the time, and this was, I'm dating myself, but this was June of 95, my dad, Walt Lembi, was starting a computer training company called Learnit. And I said to myself, you know, I know the guy he's got as the CEO there, John Ashton, who is the CFO of our family savings and loan. And I'm a little intimidated to go into our big real estate business. So I'll just go in and start as a receptionist at Learnit. And so I just kind of rolled up my sleeves and, you know, fast forward 29 years later, you know, I've been at Learnit, which is a live learning platform, and we've upskilled over 2 million individuals. And a lot of people will always come to me, Adam, and they'll say, you know, Damon, how did you come up with the idea for Learnit? And I always say, which is the truth, my dad came up with the idea. He never actually worked here, but that was his brainchild. And he did so because, like a lot of great entrepreneurs, he wanted to, in the 90s, digitize his portfolio, his real estate portfolio. And he figured, go take a class, you know, computers were new. He thought it was really boring. And he said, there's got to be a better way to do this. And that's where he reached out to that guy, John Ashton, and that's where Learnit started. And here I am ever since.
That's amazing. I love this story and how you really turned something that was, you know, maybe heartbreaking of being, you know, not the professional baseball dreams, but you turned that into something really amazing and built something incredible. And that in and of itself is a true story of how you can really transform your life. But I love this. I love some of the stories involved in how the family business changed too, because it didn't always start off as a learning platform. I mean, the whole intent of your dad kind of moving into that computer space is he found that there was a need that he needed to fill in real estate, which was really your grandparents' generation side of it. It was an evolution of this family business. Can you tell us a little bit about how that started, you know, way back in San Francisco? Because you guys had a very big, you know, big presence in the Bay Area from the standpoint of your family.
I'd be happy to. My grandfather, his name was Frankie Lembi, and I would say he was a legendary San Francisco guy. His father was the first generation into the United States and pretty much had no money. You know, I mean, they were basically bootleggers, at least, you know, in Half Moon Bay back in the day. And so my grandfather went and fought in World War II. Actually, was in both theaters, the Pacific and the European theater.
Oh, wow.
And when he came back from World War II, he took his GI Bill, got together with a friend, and opened up a pharmacy. He was a pharmacist, and he took some of that money and started buying property right off of Market Street up in San Francisco. And he'd buy small houses and probably, you know, back then they were probably $20,000, $30,000. I could be quoting that completely wrong, but something around there.
But something ridiculously lower than they are now.
Ridiculous. I mean, those houses now are at least $3 million a piece.
Right.
And so this is where Skyline Realty started. And so growing up, Frank, my grandfather, would tell us that he'd sell a house, and then Adam, he would take the sign and he'd go next door and he'd knock on the door and he'd say, "Hey, I got this money for this house. You want to sell yours?" And people would say, "Get out of here." But the next person, he said, "I just keep knocking on doors, kid, knocking on doors." And eventually other people would sell. And then through this time frame, the 50s and 60s, he built this amazing real estate empire, Skyline Realty, where a lot of the most successful people like Martin Brown and other individuals like that, it was like a university for real estate millionaires. They all kind of cut their teeth in at Skyline Realty under Frank Lembi, who was a very shrewd businessman. Very shrewd, dressed to a T. Always suit and tie. And he was somebody who always thought he can accomplish whatever he wanted to accomplish, and looked at a dollar much differently than people do today. I mean, he earned and worked for every penny, and he really evolved our real estate. I mean, he created this amazing business. And then along came my dad, Walt Lembi, who is my idol. And, I just, love my dad. He passed away in 2010. My dad played college baseball in Santa Clara, and then he got out of school and wasn't really sure what he wanted to do, to be honest. He thought about being a stockbroker or something like that. And my grandfather loaned him, I think it was $40,000. And I think he lost it right away, I think is the story. And so my dad went to go work at Skyline Realty. They were kind of polar opposite personalities. My dad was like the warmest guy ever, huge heart. My grandfather was tough. But through that, my dad also, I think I said he played baseball at Santa Clara, but not really to the level I did. And he kind of brought all his buddies as well. And I really think, I'm fast forwarding a lot here, but I really think that my dad took Skyline Realty, which turned into City Apartments, really to the next level. He brought in creative ideas, took the company in different directions, and really helped elevate, alongside with my grandfather, into what Skyline Realty turned into City Apartments in the 2000s, which was one of the thousands of units in a portfolio between $1 billion to $2 billion. So it was an incredible journey.
That's incredible.
They were able to accomplish.
Oh, for sure. I mean, that is no small feat, coming from a GI Bill, starting a pharmacy, to building a $1 to $2 billion empire in the Bay Area, and all just with just really just resilience and perseverance and knocking
grit
on doors. It's incredible. Yeah. I mean, you can learn a lot from that, and just the difference of personalities that you're talking about, with your grandfather being kind of more, maybe seasoned in the two theaters of horror and being more, just hard nosed, and your dad being more of the soft guy, but both being very successful in their own right. How was your relationship with your grandfather growing up? Did you know him well? Did you glean anything from his wisdom? Learn anything as you grew up with your grandfather in that end?
Absolutely. I was the oldest. I am the oldest grandson. He had 4 kids. My dad was the oldest, and he has 3 daughters. And so I would want to say, at least at the beginning, the favorite. I was the first grandson. And a quick side story: my middle name is Powell, Powell, and that was because the week I was born, they closed escrow on our first hotel, the Hotel Union Square. So they kind of named me after the street. So that's kind of a cool story. But no, I learned so much from my grandfather. Adam, I would say at first, a lot of times on Sundays, he would pick me up for breakfast when I was a little kid. He'd take me to this restaurant in San Francisco called Sears Fine Food. And we just walk right up to the front, get our pancakes. He knew everybody there. And then, we'd talk about business and sports and school. And then we would kind of make the rounds of all the all the apartment buildings. And he loved passing out flyers, which was funny. And so he'd leave flyers at different places, and they'd have, units that were for available or not. But he'd always say, knock on doors, kid. You got to knock on doors, like I mentioned before. Mm-hmm. And I learned so much from him, and I did throughout my entire career. Those Sunday breakfasts would turn into reoccurring Tuesday and Thursday breakfasts once I was at Learnit, with my dad, my grandfather, and my grandfather's business partner, and his girlfriend later in life, Billy Salvoris. And so all throughout my life, I would be involved either directly or indirectly around our family businesses. But I learned so much from him over the years.
That's amazing. And yeah, you mentioned that, one of the things that seems to stick with you, like learning from him, was knock on doors, just keep knocking on doors. Was there any other big lesson that you took from him and his success that you carry with you today?
I would say really number one was dream big. Mm-hmm. Both my dad and my grandfather were big dreamers. Yeah. They as I mentioned earlier, they always thought they could get anything done, and they would look at it like whatever it is they did, they can get done at the next level, that other people would even consider. And so that was a really big one. What else did I learn? I learned the importance of negotiating, and keeping track of what's important. Again, like I said, negotiating, dreaming big, and also really surrounding yourself with great people and great talent.
Yeah, which is one of the reasons. I mean, you guys have such a great culture. Fast forwarding at Learnit, that you build, you focus on building teams and also helping support other companies with their learning platforms to help them, build on their cultures. So that's expanded. And there's a big, obviously a big, I guess, gap between the building of this real estate empire in the Bay Area to mm-hmm. building a computer-based learning platform, which your dad kind of merged those two, it sounds like, back in when he needed that computer-based system. Can you talk about how your dad kind of had the freedom to do that as far as like switching over or moving into that new industry?
Well, I think he was he's just an entrepreneur, and I think that he was always wanted to try new things, and he was definitely not risk adverse. He was, like my grandfather was very niche focused, right? He wanted to focus on real estate in San Francisco, first houses and then, apartments. But my dad wanted to try everything, right? I mean, we like I said, we got into the hotels, which was a great real estate play for us. Mm-hmm. But he also wanted to open up a shopping center. And so we opened up a shopping center in San Francisco called Chelsea Square, right? So that was a little different. And then got partners and opened up a Chinese restaurant, and then a mortgage business. So I think my dad was a little bit more antsy. He wanted to try new things all the time. Yeah. And so he was always out there exploring. And I think what was great about my grandfather is that he gave my dad the autonomy to do so. I wasn't really privy to the conversations that they had, whereas like I was so young when my dad wanted to open up a mortgage business or savings and loan. But I don't know how those conversations went, but it seems like the majority of the time, my grandfather gave him the opportunity to do so and supported him in that journey.
Yeah. Well, I'm hearing a lot of that in your story here, which the way that you kind of went and pursued your own passions first before mm-hmm. kind of coming into the family business. And it sounds like your dad had the opportunity to do the same. It sounds like the theme I'm hearing is that neither of you are within the generations, you're not being pushed into the business. Is that accurate? Did you feel like there was an obligation or did it feel like you had the freedom to pursue your own destiny?
So I think for my dad, I think he was pushed into the business. I think he really was. And I think that from that, he didn't really want to do the same to me, you know? And when my baseball career came to an end, when I didn't get drafted, he really pushed me to pursue it, right? He's like, sign up, play independent ball. You always have something to fall back on. And I was just kind of done with it by then too. I just wanted to move on.
Yeah.
And so, he said, okay, well, go get your real estate license, which I never even really did. I just really kind of fell in love with Learnit and stayed there. But Adam, I think one of the main reasons why I fell in love with Learnit and I went all in, so to speak, is because I really wanted to show my dad and my grandfather that I could contribute, right? I didn't want to take for granted or be one of these kids with the silver spoon who, their daddy and their grandpa did everything for. I wanted to roll up my sleeves and say, hey guys, I can do something, right?
Yeah.
And I kind of looked at the real estate stuff like, man, that's a crowded space. I mean, those guys are legends. Maybe I could carve out my own little thing over here in at Learnit. And so that's really, I wanted to contribute and show them that I was worthy. And at the same time, an incredible experience for me was all of these, especially in the mid 2000s, whenever my dad would go to Wall Street and meet with Lehman Brothers or UBS or all these big banks, I got to sit in all those conversations. And I got to see him, and I'd be so proud. And he'd get up there, and he was a phenomenal storyteller. My grandfather would never come. It would just be my dad. My grandfather was like the patriarch back home, but my dad would get up there, and he would go through the numbers, the forecasts, and the dreams and everything. And I just couldn't be more proud. And it was always kind of fun because, we'd go to dinner with these guys, and then my dad would end up going home. And then here are the guys who are like the head of Lehman Brothers or UBS, and they'd want to hang out with me, right?
Yeah.
And so I'd go after hours, and we'd go to the bars or wherever we'd go. And the same thing would happen when they'd come to San Francisco. And just getting access to people like that was just incredible, you know? And so, even though like I wasn't in the day-to-day for the real estate, I'd have so many long conversations over drinks with all of them. And there's one story that kind of stands out is when Learnit was kind of first, I think it was 1999, and we were in a big opportunity for the Gap, for an RFP for Gap headquarters. And we're out meeting with Morgan Stanley. The head guy at Morgan Stanley at the time for real estate was a guy by the name of Spencer Young. And I remember this like it was yesterday. Spencer's trying to win my dad's business. I'm there 25 years old, 24 years old. And we're overlooking the Hudson River. We're on like the 52nd floor. And my dad stops Spencer, who's all buttoned up, Ivy League guy. And he's like, hey, Spencer, my kid's got a big deal with the Gap, and so give him some advice on how to win the deal. And at first Spencer was kind of like, I don't know what he's even talking about here, right?
Right.
But he gave me some great advice. He said, tell me a little bit about what's going on. And then, his advice was, hey, always add value, always be confident, and don't ever just call to check in, show value, go the extra mile, get them comfortable and build trust. And I've always thought about that and used that. But I also realized that a lot of people don't get that opportunity or that access to people like that. And I did through my dad. And so that was great.
Yeah. That's such great advice. And I mean, I think that there's such a good message there that, you can appreciate the access you have to the things that you have that are the resources that can help lift you up, whether it's people, communities, or financial resources, whatever they may be, and use the resources you have, the skills to add value. There's so much importance there. And I heard the undertones of that too when you were talking about, how you entered into the family business. It wasn't just about, hey, Dad, I need a job. Where can you put me? Where do you need me? It was, no, where can I contribute? And that attitude, I think, is the difference. I know a lot of folks that are working in family businesses, myself included, have that underlying cloud of feeling like, am I being entitled, or am I being, do I have that silver spoon syndrome? And it sounds like you found kind of a way to work with that. Did you ever kind of feel like that was a challenge for you? Was that ever kind of like, some form of pressure that you felt, was this idea that, is this feeling like an entitlement, or am I actually working towards what I want to? Hopefully that question makes sense.
Yeah, it makes sense. And I know where you're going with it. I would say to a degree, you always kind of felt the pressure, right?
Yeah.
You always kind of felt the pressure. And whether it's through your friend group or through your family's friend groups, or, for the people you're around. And, but I just kind of thrived on it, to be honest, and I look at my brothers and sisters, and we just wanted to make sure that everybody knew that we weren't around for a free ride,
Right.
And that and this goes back to my mom and as well, is that we understood how lucky we were, Adam, to have what we had, and to grow up where we did, and that other people didn't have what we had. And so I think that helped drive all four of us. I'm the oldest of four, to really be, I'd like to say, humble, good kids, and you look at, three of us are all four of us are entrepreneurs in our own way now.
Right.
My sister's a baker. My other one got a great interior design company, and my brother, who I'd love to get on this show, but he's a pretty quiet guy, who's still in the real estate from our family stuff. But we all were driven from that. And one thing I want to say for your listeners out there who might be feeling like not entitled, but have the silver spoon syndrome, and it's kind of like what you just mentioned, Adam. Early on in my career, I was almost hesitant to take advantage of the connections and resources I had, because I didn't want to seem entitled.
Right.
But as I got older and more experienced in my career, and this is important, leverage those resources, leverage that network. Because at the end of the day, and to use a silly baseball analogy, when you step into the plate, you still have to perform, right? So don't feel like, oh, I only had this opportunity because my dad gave it to me, or whatever, my grandfather. No, you have to perform, and you have to be successful. So don't disregard those opportunities. And I think it's kind of silly sometimes where people are like, no, I'm going to make it on my own. I'm not going to use any of my family's help, right?
Yeah.
Use your family's help. Take your family's help, but do right with it. Do it with integrity and lead well. And, but don't make it harder than it needs to be for yourself. I mean, prove, like when I was at Learnit, and I would have all these people who had 15, 20 years, they were teachers of experience. And I'm sure they thought, okay, here's, Walt's kid. He's going to, come in and do whatever. But I just rolled up my sleeves and I worked hard, and I took advantage of the opportunities. And for a while I had, imposter syndrome, and, like, oh, I'm just here because I was, my dad or whatever. But later on in my career, I realized that if you have those opportunities, the world is tough as it is, right?
Yeah.
It's very tough. Take the opportunities you have and make the most out of them.
Yeah, and I appreciate you putting it that way, and talking about kind of leveraging that luck that you have, or leveraging the fortune that you have to work hard and build something. Because I know that imposter syndrome, I mean, it's existed in me, and I think it maybe I'm projecting that a lot of family business people that work in family businesses feel that as well, because it wasn't necessarily something they built, but they now have an opportunity to work for it. But I've seen, and this is why I love your story, is because I've heard before, that there's not really a generation 1, generation 2, generation 3 in a family business. There's a generation 1, then there's a generation 1, then there's a generation 1. You're almost thinking of it as an entrepreneurial organization, no matter how old your company may be. And you have that spirit to the point where this real estate, empire that your grandfather built, became, it still exists from what I'm hearing. And then but it evolved too into this computer-based learning platform, Learnit, that has itself evolved in a way. How is that evolved now, and how is Learnit becoming? What is Learnit doing in the future to kind of build on that legacy?
Yeah, well, first of all, I really like the generation one, because if you look at it, that's exactly what my dad did, right? My grandfather came up with, he created it, but then my dad took it, I think, in a different direction and really elevated it. And my brothers really continued with what he's doing. I mean, honestly, and I'm okay with saying this, a quick Google search will show it. Most of what we had with our real estate went away. And that was around the 2009, Great Recession. Right. And it was tough, right? And it was just tough. We got over leveraged and made some mistakes, and some of it just wasn't avoidable. And so that was incredibly challenging. And it was right around the time that my father passed away as well. And but the interesting thing is, a lot of the companies who picked up our real estate afterwards, the majority of it, are really struggling now too, right? Yeah. So it kind of goes in waves. So that was a roller coaster ride, and I am proud of my my brother Taylor, who was able to siphon off some of that real estate and make a tremendous career out of it. And him and I are invest in some properties together. One's a office building, which is really tough right now in San Francisco, sure. Right? Really, really tough. And, the hotels changed hands after a while. But when people ask Adam, well, what does it feel like to have all this? And then some of that, you don't anymore. I like to say, because it's a question I get asked a lot, hey, it was a tremendous opportunity, and I'm incredibly grateful for the ride and the learning lessons that it provided for me. And in my own way, I was kind of fortunate to have Learnit a little bit separate from that, which wasn't affected in 2009, 2010. Sure. I was grateful in the early days to have my family support, especially financially, to get through some tough times. But to answer your question, what Learnit's evolved into, we went from being a computer training company to a live learning platform that really focuses on upskilling. I don't like the term soft skills, but human skills. And, we help develop new managers. We help companies improve their communication and create really learning organizations. Sure. And so we've gone from, hey, let's just teach you how to use Excel and PowerPoint, which we still do, to really being, in a lot of situations, outsourced learning departments for organizations. And that's really where we are.
That's amazing. And so in addition to the computer-based training that you've evolved from and continue to do, what kind of training are you doing? What kind of learning are you helping to develop in different corporations?
Yeah, I'd say the number, companies turn to us when they're like, okay, we have a bunch of managers who are stressed. Maybe this is their first position as managers, and they don't really have the skills equipped to lead teams, right? So then we come in and we design programs, and we help them become better at empathy, becoming more adaptable, running better one-on-one meetings, being better leaders, especially in challenging times like right now, being more mindful of people who are maybe going through burnout or, better at communicating. So that is like our target is really, I would say, individual contributors through mid-managers. Because a lot of times, mid-managers are the ones who need the most help, right? They're getting pulled from the executives. They have their priorities and their goals. And then you have the individual contributors, right? And so you got to kind of go in both directions. You got to help support your team beneath you to make sure that they have what they need to be successful. And then you got to be able to report, you got to manage up to your senior leaders. And so I think that's really one of our core strengths is helping mid-managers become successful. And then along with just some of the core skills, like how do you become a better listener? How do you deal with conflict? And yeah, and time management. So a lot of those core skills.
A lot of skills that
which
a lot
are
of
which are
people
by the
need.
way which are even more important now with the whole AI stuff, right?
Oh my gosh,
so
yeah.
those are all coming back. I mean, a lot of sure, some of the technology and AI will take away or automate some stuff, but now more than ever, people need to know how to communicate, and they need to know how to be adaptable, and they need to learn how to ask better questions and be creative. So that's actually been a big help for us.
Oh, it has. Yeah, I was curious about that. How AI has impacted your business in particular, because I would imagine, at least looking from the outside, there would be a perceived fear that maybe AI replaces that, and just you can build a training platform using AI. But it sounds like it's doing the reverse. Can you share on that a little bit?
Yeah, I in a couple of months ago, I went to the ATD annual conference. American Training to whatever it's called, ATD. And there was probably 500 vendors. And I would say, in some sort of training, and probably 75% were AI based, AI assessments, AI coaching, AI everything. I think AI is great. And for all your listeners, I think that you got to get on the AI bandwagon, be an AI first company.
Yeah.
Now, with that being said, a lot of that hasn't come to fruition yet. Doesn't really work.
Mm-hmm.
And so, but I also don't think that there's ever going to completely replace what we do, which is live instructor-led training. I think that you just need to learn how to merge those two together.
Yeah.
And so, sure. I mean, it might be difficult in a couple of years if you're an Excel instructor, right? I mean, that's going to be pretty challenging. But when it comes to learning how to ask better questions and managing a team, I talk about this a lot. If you're a leader out there and you have 10 people on your team, now you got to look at it like you have 12, and these other two are going to be, whether it's ChatGPT or some other generative AI or adaptive AI. So you got to add those AI team members to your team.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so they become part of the family business, right?
They part of the family business.
Yeah. So, and I kind of want to go back to something you said earlier about you felt that the transferable skills of being an athlete might not transfer into the business when you came into it. That was one of your fears. But I wanted to kind of dig into that a little bit more, because I know you wrote a book and you've talked a lot about the athlete mindset and how that has helped you in leadership. Can you kind of touch on that? How maybe your perspective has changed on how being an athlete has helped you in leadership?
Oh, I think it's outside of what I learned from my dad and my grandfather. I wrote a book called The Learnit Leader Mindset, Tools, and Traits. And it's really my experience playing for 3 Hall of Fame baseball coaches in college. And I didn't realize it at the time, but what I got was an athletic education. And there's this guy that I interviewed on my podcast, Jay Dixon, who's a great guy. And he was a Division I athlete as well. And there's no replacement, him and I like to talk about, than having an athletic education. And really, I'm out there talking to a lot of athletes these days about, hey, you got to have more confidence. What you did on the sports field can make you a great leader. I mean, studies have shown that CEOs who are athletes have a 15% higher return on assets than non-athletes. Oh, wow. And a lot of this has to do with, and a 17% longer tenure than non-athletes. Mm-hmm. Nothing against non-athletes, but, you learn discipline, you learn collaboration, you learn, Adam, what I think is critical, learning agility, right? Mm-hmm. In baseball, you step up to the plate, you strike out, you get immediate feedback probably from your coach. And then 15 minutes later, you got to turn around and do it again. And same thing in the business world. You need to be able to continue to evolve and grow and have a learning mindset. And I think that all those tie into having athletic education. Mm-hmm. And I didn't realize it at the time, but because I was like, well, I never had a job in my life, and now here I am. But as time went on, one of the first things I noticed too, Adam, was that, when I got to the work world, everybody wasn't as competitive as I was, and didn't seem like everybody worked as hard,
Yeah.
right? And I wasn't used to that. I was used to coming from a competitive, let's win, let's collaborate as a team environment. And it was a little bit of a culture shock, but over time, I think it's really helped me develop my leadership skills and kind of run a baseball team, run Learnit like as a coach where, you put your team first and you get all your success and your wins through your team, right? You give them the success and wins. And then as a coach, you own up to the mistakes. So I couldn't be more grateful for the opportunity I had to play sports and what I learned from great coaches and some pretty terrible coaches too. So It's all learning lessons.
Yeah, that's a good perspective. I think that the idea that you can learn different things from even when the coach or the boss in this case might not be the best person for the job. And what I hear there too is that if you're in a family business and you might be listening and you have kids, that having them helping them to develop that athlete mindset or be on sports teams when they're younger, working with coaches and doing that could be a great benefit for them when they get into to leadership roles and everything like that. That's pretty incredible. And then as far as your kids, like, I know you how are you thinking?
I got two of them.
Got two kids. Yeah, me too.
A 6-year-old and a 3-year-old. I'm a late starter.
So have they already started in the business or? No?
Well, they think so.
Yeah.
One thing I want to touch on for your listeners is that when it comes to sports, because a lot of people, and things have changed, I guess, over time, but a lot of people come to me and say, hey, I want my kid to be a D1 baseball player or D1 whatever it is, like you, Damon, like you. And so I got them a coach, I got them a personal coach, and we're playing one sport and we're playing it around the clock. I completely disagree with that. I don't care what anybody wants to say, right? I mean, I think first of all, let's take my son Wally, for example, who's 3, named after my dad, Walter. I want Wally playing all the sports, right? And they got to get out there and get away from video games and looking at your cell phone and whatever. Get out there and play sports, learn how to communicate, but play different sports, play soccer, play tennis, play badminton, play whatever, pickleball, whatever it is, right? So don't specialize too soon. There's a great book called Range by David Epstein, and he talks about the importance of being a generalist. So that is one thing that I always stop parents in their tracks when they're like, oh, my kid's playing baseball 24/7, bad move, they're going to get burnt out. And I also look at it, whether it's a family business or baseball, I'm not going to force Wally to do it. I mean, I want to give him the opportunity to explore in what direction he wants to go, because I know for myself, getting into the business world, my dad didn't pressure me into anything, but those are big shoes to fill. I mean, if you're in San Francisco and you said your last name is Lembi, people know who you are. They still do, right? Mm-hmm. And so I don't want to put that undue pressure on my kids. Lucy, who's 6, who thinks her desk is right here next to me, and this is her office, right?
Yeah,
too.
Right.
I just want to give them the opportunity. My wife and I give our kids the opportunity to learn different things and go in the direction of whatever passions they have, and don't feel like they're tied to doing whatever their dad or their mom says. Hey, don't get me wrong, right? If Wally, who's a monster, he's big, wants to be a baseball player, I always like to joke, my dad was like a bench warmer. I was pretty much a star in college. I think Wally's going to be a big leaguer, if he wants to be,
the
right?
Next A-Rod, yeah.
Yeah. So, but I want to give them the opportunity to draw their own path and support them.
That's great. Yeah. I think that's always a big, of course, a big challenge with family businesses, that sense of feeling either obligated or free, or there's something here. So you are kind of letting them carve their own path. How are you maybe preventing that sense of obligation in their eyes to or maybe it's just this false desire of like, oh, there's this secure thing that I have here, this fallback that I might easily fall into instead of pursuing like maybe what I want to pursue. Is there any advice there that you have for the listeners?
Well, it's tough for me because my kids are so little.
Sure.
But I live in Marin, California, and we're surrounded by, people who are really successful, either, self-made or other family businesses. And, this is a conversation that, Adam, that I have with my close friends is how are we going to have it be a fine line where we give our kids, whatever they want and they need, but they don't just take it for granted, right? And that's going to be, it's going to be a challenge, because I want them to have the hunger and the competitiveness and just not understand, or just understand that, sure, we're going to Disneyland or you have some nice toys, but to be grateful for it. So I don't know. I don't really have all the answers yet, especially with the kids this age, but I definitely don't want them to grow up and be spoiled brats. I'll tell you that right now.
Sure.
Right. So, they need to, give them what they want and need, but have to work for some of the stuff. Right. Mm-hmm. I was never allowed at home to just lay around the house ever. Right. If I just, my parents led by example. So I guess what I'm getting to is I just want to lead by example and let them know that they got to be grateful for what they have, but they also need to work for it and help others. My dad and my mom, we always wanted to help others and be giving. And that's what I loved about my dad, man. He loved the underdog, right? Mm-hmm. He loved the underdog and always wanted to help and give them opportunities. And, I want my kids to feel the same way. I don't want them to be snobs or jerks. I'm not going to let that happen.
Yeah. Well, that's great. It kind of goes back to what you were saying about contributing, adding value, building that work ethic in them so that they have that desire to add value and contribute as well. Really, that's really great. And as far as the future of Learnit, what do you see there as far as your long-term legacy of that? What's evolving? What's what's exciting in the future for that?
I think what's really exciting, and this kind of goes back to the AI stuff, is we're starting to really weave in AI tools like an AI habit coach, AI advisors. And when it comes to learning, we all know it's not a one and done, right? So it's not, hey, go take a 2-hour class on emotional intelligence and all of a sudden you have self-awareness, right? That doesn't happen, right? So you need little things to help make it more sticky. And so we're building tools around that. Like I said, whether it's a habit coach or reminders or exercises or assessments, that all are evolving through the different technology. So that's all really exciting. And that's what's great about our industry. Things keep changing. Also, with my podcast, the Learn It All podcast, I love getting all these great leaders on in these conversations and then taking that content, snipping that out and maybe even including that where, hey, you took this class on setting vision and then maybe playing some little pieces of that, as learning lessons. And so, just taking all this content that's available to us out there and repurposing it to help my goal is really to help build future generation of leaders, right? Yeah. To help leaders of the future evolve, so that when our kids grow up, Adam, that they live in a much better world than we have today. Because, and let's start them young. Let's have them become better leaders. And that's what gets me excited about Learnit is, for these people who are getting into leadership roles and the kids younger, like how do we help them, give them the tools and the resources to be great, human leaders.
Yeah. I absolutely
with integrity.
Yeah.
Right. Do the right thing, just be transparent, servant leadership, whatever you want to call it. Right. Like let's just get some great leaders in all aspects of life.
Yeah, no, that's so good. And that's what I love And that ties a nice little bow on this interview, because that's what I love about that your family business in particular, that has that has gone through so many different variations and continues to like branch out in different areas and build, is that it is one of the greatest examples that I've heard of an entrepreneurial spirit that evolved into a contribution spirit, a giving back, a wanting to build up leaders and expand people. And that's, I think, representative of how, your grandfather set the example for your father and set the example for you, and you've built on that. And now you're giving that gift to your kids. And those are some of the best things that we can hope for in a family business. And while I'm sure that there has been, that it hasn't been perfect, it sounds like it's been an amazing journey for you.
No, it has been. And oh yeah, I mean, I could sit here for another hour telling you about my frustrations with
right.
I mean, one real quick story. My dad was classic. We're getting back to passing out flyers. Back in the day, he on InDesign created 5,000 flyers of Windows 95, right? And so they showed up. He's like, we pop us all in his van, and we go pass them out, on the streets. This is back in the early 90s. Well, he left a D out of Windows, so it just said Windows. And I said, we can't pass these out. This is ridiculous. We can't pass these out.
Right.
He's like, we're going to do it anyways. So, I mean, we all have and there's, a million times where we'd butt heads on ideas, and I saw him butt heads with ideas, and, there's all those types of challenges that go along. But I think what was great at the end of the day, we could argue and fight, and then 15 minutes later, we're the best of friends. We were the best of friends again.
Yeah.
And that's just, I miss those days, man. I miss those days.
Yeah. Well, that's that's a great example too of healthy conflict too. You can get into it. You can debate and fight on things, as long as you come back together and realize that it's rooted in love and the greater good.
Separated. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Separated. We'd fight, but then or argue, whatever. But we never went on too long, and then we'd come home, and that it was just stay at the office, and I would go to my parents' house for dinner, and, but yeah. And I think for you listeners out there who were working for your dad or for your mom, and maybe you get frustrated with them sometimes, hey, you know what? They got to where they are for a reason, right? And so let's not forget that, right? So us younger generations, we don't always have all the answers. So don't automatically want to go in and change everything right off the bat, or tell your dad or your grandfather they're wrong. Because there are certain times where they prove me that they were right. And that doesn't mean you can't evolve and move forward. But be grateful for being given the opportunity to work in a family business, because not everybody, a lot of people don't have that, right? So respect and be grateful for what your family's created, and, do your best to contribute and start that next generation one, Adam, that you're talking about.
Yeah, that's so good. Thank you, Damon, so much for that insight, for your wisdom, and for sharing all of your story here today with our listeners. And check out the Learnit All podcast. It's really good, and it's just a great platform to help to just gain some wisdom from other people who are doing some amazing things. But also, the platform of Learnit is just really great to build some of those skills that you and your team might need. And as you could tell from Damon, he and his team have a passion for helping build leaders. Damon Lembi, where can people find you, and where would you like them to reach out?
Connect with me on LinkedIn. I love LinkedIn. And please check out the Learn It All podcast. I'm like obsessed with the podcasting stuff now, because you get to meet so many great individuals. And our website is learnit.com. Hit me up. I'll send you a code to a free class, as long as you promise to give me feedback from the class.
Awesome. Well, that's really great, and that's kind of you. And I will take you up on that too. Since love to develop our leaders too. But thank you. So find Damon on LinkedIn, and check out learnit.com, and check out the Learn It All podcast, which is available on YouTube and all the audio platforms, I presume, as well.
Yep.
Awesome.
Spotify, Apple, YouTube, all of them.
Awesome. Well, Damon Lembi, thank you so much for being here. This was a joy for the second time, better than the first, and just really good all around. And the first time was really good. So this was a great interview. Thanks,
hey, Adam. Thank you for having me, man. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much. And to everyone out there, thanks for joining us. If you enjoyed this episode, share it with a friend who might need it. And also don't forget to subscribe and like it, do all those things. And we will see you next time. Thanks for joining us. Thanks for joining me on this episode of the Fearless Family Business Show. If you're enjoying this show, please thumbs up this episode and subscribe wherever that subscribe button is. And you'll get more family business education and insights in your inbox. And if this episode resonated with you, share it with a friend, a colleague, a spouse, your mom, your dad, a second cousin, whomever you think might benefit from hearing this show. And if you're in a family business and you've got a great story to share, contact me because I would love to see if you'd be a great fit for this show. I'd love to interview you. Or if you're struggling in your family business to find your unique identity or voice, or you need an injection of new life into your family business, I'd also love to hear from you. I'd love to learn more about you, and I'd love to see if I can help. Simply email me at adam@fearlessfamilybusiness.com, and we'll get you connected to the right place. Together, we can elevate the love, the legacy, and the lifestyle we all experience in our family businesses. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.